Jake Morrison stood by the big window of his ship and looked out at the giant space station. It was huge, bigger than most cities back on Earth. Thousands of lights blinked on its surface like stars. This was the center of the galaxy, where all the alien races came to talk and make deals. Jake was an admiral in the human space navy. His ship, the Aurora, was not the biggest or the strongest ship at the station. Humans were still new here. They had only joined the galaxy community 300 years ago. Most of the other aliens barely noticed them during meetings. The galaxy had been peaceful for 2,000 years. No wars, no fighting, no trouble. The old alien races that ran everything made sure of that. They called themselves the Council of Elders. These aliens were very old and very wise, or so they said. They had rules for everything and everyone followed them. Jake did not mind the peace. Peace was nice. But sometimes he wondered if all these aliens had forgotten how to be strong when they needed to be. His grandfather used to tell him stories about the old days when humans had to fight for everything they had. Those days seemed very far away now. On this day, everything changed. The alert sirens started ringing all through the station. Jake ran to the command center of his ship. His crew was already there looking at the screens with worried faces. "Sir, we have contacts coming in from the edge of the system," said Lieutenant Amy Brooks. She was young, but smart, and Jake trusted her. "Big ships, sir, really big." Jake looked at the screen. The ships were dark, so dark they seemed to eat the light around them. They were shaped like sharp knives, long and deadly looking. He had never seen ships like these before. "How many?" he asked. 300, sir. Maybe more." Jake felt cold. 300 warships was a lot of firepower, more than the entire human fleet. More than most alien fleets, too. The alien ship stopped at the edge of the system and just waited. They did not answer any calls from the station. They did not send any messages. They just sat there like silent hunters. Then the message came. It was broadcast on every channel at once. The voice was deep and cold, speaking perfect Galactic standard language. The words made everyone in the command center go quiet. "People of the galaxy, we are the Zephyrian Empire. We have returned after 2,000 years of exile. The age of weakness is over. The age of the strong begins now." Jake felt his hands tighten into fists. He did not like the sound of this. The voice continued. "You have grown soft in your peace. You have forgotten what strength means. We will teach you again. All worlds will bow to the Empire. All races will serve us. This is not a request. This is a fact." Amy looked at Jake with wide eyes. "Sir, what do they mean?" returned. "I don't know," Jake said. But he had a bad feeling about it. The message was not done. "You have one solar cycle to surrender. Open your worlds to us. Give us your ships and your weapons. Accept our rule. Do this, and some of you may live to serve the Empire, refuse, and watch your worlds burn." The message ended. Silence filled the command center. Then the panic started. Jake rushed to the main council chamber. It was chaos. Aliens were running everywhere, shouting in dozens of different languages. Some were crying, others were arguing. A few had fainted. The Council of Elders tried to keep order, but they looked scared too. These were beings who had lived for thousands of years, who had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. If they were scared, things were very bad. Elder Zoroth, the oldest member of the council, called for quiet. His voice shook as he spoke. "We must discuss our response to this threat." "Response?" screamed Ambassador Kellen of the Rigel Union. "They have 300 warships. What response can we give?" "We could fight," suggested General Vex of the Altair Defense Force, but even he did not sound sure. "Fight with what?" asked Admiral Train of the Beta Fleet. "Our ships are for exploration and trade. Theirs are built for war." Jake listened to the argument go round and round. Every suggestion led to the same problem. The galaxy had no real military. They had police ships and patrol boats, but nothing that could fight a real war. Hours passed. Reports came in from all over the galaxy. The Zephyrian ships were everywhere, surrounding major worlds and trade routes. They were not attacking yet, but the message was clear: surrender or die. One by one, the alien races made their choice. The Centauri Republic was first. They sent a message of complete surrender within 6 hours. The Vegan Confederacy followed an hour later, then the Rigel Union, then the Altair Defense Force. By the end of the day, every member of the galactic community had agreed to surrender. Every member except one. Jake stood before the council with Amy beside him. The chamber was nearly empty now. Most of the ambassadors had gone home to prepare for the surrender. Only a few remained to hear humanity's answer. Elder Zoroth looked tired and old. Admiral Morrison, humanity must join the surrender. You cannot stand alone against such power. Jake looked around the empty chamber. These aliens had been in space for thousands of years before humans had even invented the wheel. They were older and wiser and more advanced. But right now, they looked like scared children. Elder Zoroth, Jake said quietly, humanity thanks the council for their concern. Then you will surrender with us? Jake felt Amy tense beside him. He thought about his grandfather's stories. He thought about all the humans who had died fighting for their freedom. He thought about what it meant to be human. No, he said. The word hung in the air like a challenge. No, Jake said again, louder this time. Humanity will not surrender. We will not bow. We will not serve. If the Zephyrians want our worlds, they can come and try to take them. Elder Zoroth stared at him, in shock. You will doom your entire species for pride? Jake smiled. It was not a nice smile. Elder, you mistake us. We're not doing this for pride. We're doing this because it's right. Because someone has to. Because that's what humans do. He turned and walked out of the chamber, Amy following behind him. As the doors closed, he heard Elder Zoroth speaking to the few remaining delegates. Humanity is expelled from the galactic community for refusing to comply with the surrender mandate. They are now enemies of galactic peace. Jake stopped walking and started laughing. Amy looked at him like he had gone crazy. Sir? She asked. Amy, Jake said, wiping tears from his eyes. We just got kicked out of the galaxy for having a backbone. I don't know whether to be insulted or proud. Amy started laughing too. Soon they were both laughing so hard they could barely walk. Behind them, the galaxy prepared to surrender to its new masters. Ahead of them, humanity prepared for war. The 2,000-year peace was over. The real test was about to begin. Captain Ryan Davis was drinking his morning coffee when the message came in. His ship, the Defiant, was on patrol near the outer edge of human space. It was supposed to be a quiet assignment. Nothing ever happened out here. The communication officer, Steve Carter, looked up from his station with a confused expression. Captain, we're getting an official message from the Galactic Council. It's marked as urgent. Ryan set down his coffee cup. Put it on screen. The message appeared on the main display. It was written in the formal language that the council used. For official business, Ryan started reading it out loud to his crew. By unanimous vote of all member species, except humanity, the Galactic Confederation formally surrenders to the Zephyrian Empire. Several crew members looked up from their work. That got their attention. Ryan continued reading. All military assets are to be transferred immediately to Zephyrian control. All planetary governors are to report to Zephyrian authorities for processing. Chief, Engineer Lisa Parker stopped what she was doing. Processing? What does that mean? It gets better, Ryan said, trying not to smile. Humans are hereby expelled from the Confederation for failure to comply with the surrender mandate. Humanity is now considered an enemy of galactic peace and will be treated as such. The bridge went quiet for a moment. Then someone started laughing. Ryan was not sure who it was, but soon the whole bridge crew was laughing. Steve Carter laughed so hard he almost fell out of his chair. Enemy of peace? Steve gasped between laughs. For not surrendering to space bullies? Lisa wiped tears from her eyes. They kicked us out for having courage. That's the funniest thing I've heard all year. Ryan sent the message to every human, ship and colony. Within hours, the news was everywhere. Human social media exploded with jokes and memes. Comedy shows made fun of the situation. News anchors could barely keep straight faces while reporting the story. On Earth, President Helen Ross called an emergency meeting. But when she tried to address the nation, she could not stop smiling. "My fellow humans," she began, "we have apparently been deemed too dangerous for a galaxy that just gave up without a fight. I honestly don't know whether to be insulted or proud." The crowd in the assembly hall roared with laughter. Someone shouted, "Proud, Madam President." "Definitely proud," President Ross grinned. "You know what? I think you're right. If standing up to bullies makes us enemies of their version of peace, then I'm fine with being the enemy." The crowd cheered and clapped for 10 minutes straight. But, while humans were laughing, bad things were happening in the rest of the galaxy. The Zephyrians had started taking over worlds that had surrendered. They were not gentle about it. Reports came in from refugee ships that managed to escape. The stories were not funny at all. Entire populations were being moved to work camps. Families were separated. Resources were stripped from planets and sent to Zephyrian worlds. The aliens who had surrendered so quickly learned that giving up did not save them from suffering. Admiral Jake Morrison read these reports in his office. On the battleship Titan, he was now in charge of all human military forces. The job had gotten a lot harder in the past few weeks. "Sir," said his aide, Commander Ben Walsh, "we're getting more refugee ships every day. They're all asking the same thing." "Let me guess," Jake said. "They want us to help them." "Yes, sir. They're begging us to fight the Zephyrians." Jake looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were suffering because their leaders had been too scared to fight. Now those same leaders were asking humans to risk their lives to fix the problem. "What do you think, Ben?" Jake asked. Ben was quiet for a moment. "Sir, I think we're going to fight them anyway. The Zephyrians won't leave us alone just because we're not part of the Confederation anymore. They'll come for us eventually." Jake nodded. "That's what I think too. Question is, do we wait for them to come to us, or do we go to them first?" Before Ben could answer, another message came in. This one was from the Zephyrian Empire itself. It was addressed to all humans. "Humans of Earth and the colonial worlds," the message began. "You stand alone against the inevitable. Your former allies have accepted the wisdom of surrender. You have no friends left in the galaxy. Join them in service to the Empire or join them in chains." Jake read the message twice. Then he started laughing, not the happy laughter from before, but the cold laughter of someone who had just been threatened by an idiot. "Ben," he said, "send a message to all human worlds. Tell them we have our answer about what to do next." "What should I tell them, sir?" Jake's smile was not pleasant. "Tell them the Zephyrians just made the biggest mistake in their long history. They threatened us." The message went out across human space. Every human world, every human ship, every human colony got the same simple statement. "The Zephyrians have demanded our surrender. Our answer is no. Prepare for war." But humans were not just preparing for war. They were preparing for something the galaxy had not seen in 2,000 years. They were preparing to show everyone what happened when you pushed a species that refused to back down. Dr. Kevin Wright was a scientist who studied alien technology. He had been working day and night to understand Zephyrian ships and weapons. What he found was interesting. Their technology is impressive, he told a meeting of military leaders, but it's designed for intimidation as much as fighting. "Look at this." He showed them pictures of Zephyrian ships. They were dark and scary looking, like nightmares made of metal. "The darkness around their ships isn't stealth technology," Kevin explained. "It's a fear response trigger. It's meant to make other species panic and run away." General Patricia Hayes, head of Human Ground Forces, raised her hand. "Does it work on humans?" Kevin smiled. "I tested it on a dozen volunteers. Want to know what happened?" "Tell us." Half of them laughed. The other half asked if we could make our ships look scarier. The room erupted in laughter, but Kevin was not done. "There's more. Their tactics are designed for enemies who surrender quickly. Everything they do assumes the other side will give up after the first attack." "What happens when they fight someone who doesn't give up?" asked Admiral Morrison. That's what we're about to find out, sir. Across human space, the preparation continued. Shipyards that had been building exploration, vessels started building warships. Factories that made tools started making weapons. Mining operations focused on getting materials needed for military equipment. But the most important preparation was happening in the human mind. For 2,000 years, the galaxy had believed that peace came from avoiding conflict. Humans had never forgotten that real peace came from being strong enough to protect what you cared about. Captain Sandra Lewis commanded a small stealth ship called the Ghost. Her job was to sneak into Zephyrian territory and see what they were doing. What she found confirmed what everyone suspected. They're having trouble, she reported to Admiral Morrison. Some of the species they conquered are fighting back. Not well, but they're trying. What kind of resistance? Emotional stuff, mostly. Angry attacks with no planning. The Zephyrians are crushing them easily, but they have to use more troops than they expected. Jake nodded. They're used to enemies who give up. They don't know how to handle people who keep fighting. Sir, Sandra said, there's something else. The Zephyrians are getting frustrated. They expected to rule the galaxy by now, but they're spending all their time putting down small rebellions. Good, Jake said. Let them get frustrated. Frustrated enemies make mistakes. 3 months after the surrender of the galaxy, the Zephyrian fleet finally arrived at the edge of human space. 300 dark ships arranged in perfect formation, ready to add humanity to their growing empire. They had no idea what they were about to face. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Titan, looking at the enemy fleet on his screens. His own ships were ready. Human crews were at their stations. Everyone knew what was coming. Sir, said his communication officer, the Zephyrians are sending us a message. Put it through. The voice was the same cold tone humans had heard months ago. Humans, you have had time to see what happens to those who resist the Empire. Your former allies serve us now. Surrender and some of you may live. Refuse, and all of you will die. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was calm and ready. These were people who had trained their whole lives for this moment. Send them our reply, he said. The message went out on all frequencies, broadcast to every ship in both fleets and every surviving communication relay in the galaxy. This is Admiral Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. We got your surrender demand. We thought about it real hard. Jake paused and smiled. Our answer is no. If you want our worlds, come and take them. The Zephyrian fleet began to move forward. The real test was about to begin. Colonel Matt Johnson walked through the underground command center on Luna, Earth's moon. The place was buzzing with activity. Hundreds of people worked at computer stations, analyzing data that came in from across the galaxy. Maps covered the walls showing Zephyrian positions and human defenses. Matt had been studying the enemy for 3 months now. Every piece of information from refugee ships, every spy report, every intercepted communication went through his team. What they learned was both encouraging and frightening. They're good at what they do, Matt told the assembled military leaders. But what they do is scare people into giving up. Their whole strategy depends on enemies surrendering after the first show of force. General Patricia Hayes leaned forward in her chair. What happens when they meet someone who doesn't surrender? That's what we're about to find out, ma'am. Matt pulled up a holographic display showing Zephyrian ship formations. The dark vessels moved in perfect patterns, looking like a swarm of deadly insects. Look at how they arranged their ships, Matt said. It's designed to look scary, not to fight effectively. They put their biggest ships in front to intimidate the enemy. Their smaller ships hide in the back. So they're all show and no substance? Asked Admiral Morrison. Not exactly, sir. They have real firepower. But they've never had to use it against organized resistance. Every enemy they've faced in the past 2,000 years either surrendered immediately or fell apart after the first battle. Dr. Kevin Wright, the scientist studying Zephyrian technology, added his findings. Their weapons are powerful, but they're designed for destroying helpless targets, cities, space stations, ships that can't fight back. They're not built for ship-to-ship combat against enemies who shoot back. He showed them detailed scans of Zephyrian vessels. See these energy projectors? They create that darkness effect. around their ships. It takes a lot of power to maintain, power that could be used for shields or weapons instead. Captain Sandra Lewis, who had been running spy missions into enemy territory, had more intelligence to share. The Zephyrians are getting frustrated. They thought they'd control the galaxy by now, but they're having to fight small rebellions on every world they conquered. What kind of rebellions? Asked General Hayes. Badly organized ones. The aliens are brave, but they don't know how to fight. They attack with emotion instead of planning. The Zephyrians crush them easily, but it takes time and resources. Sandra brought up images from her reconnaissance missions. They showed Zephyrian troops moving through alien cities, rounding up civilians, and loading them onto transport ships. They're treating the conquered populations like livestock, Sandra continued, moving them to work camps, separating families, taking all the resources they can find. The locals are getting desperate. Matt nodded grimly. Desperate people do desperate things, but desperation without training just gets people killed. Admiral Morrison studied the intelligence reports. How long before they reach our space? 2 months, sir. Maybe less if they decide to speed up their advance. 2 months to prepare for a war against an enemy that had conquered half the galaxy. It seemed impossible, but humans had advantages the Zephyrians could not know about. Colonel Jack Turner was in charge of weapon development. His team had been working around the clock to adapt human technology for the coming fight. We've been thinking about this all wrong, Jack told his engineers. Everyone else in the galaxy tried to match Zephyrian technology. We need to do something different. What do you mean, sir? Asked Dr. Lisa Chen, his chief scientist. The Zephyrians expect their enemies to fight like them. Big ships, fancy technology, lots of show. What if we don't? Jack pulled up designs for new human weapons. They looked simple compared to the elaborate Zephyrian equipment, but there was a deadly efficiency to them. These are built for one thing: killing Zephyrian ships. No fancy effects, no intimidation factors, just pure destructive power. Meanwhile, Captain Ryan Davis was training human crews for the new style of combat they would face. His ship, the Defiant, had been modified with the latest weapons and tactics. Forget everything you know about space combat, Ryan told his officers. The Zephyrians fight like they're putting on a show. We're going to fight like we mean it. He ran his crew through simulation after simulation, teaching them to work together in ways the enemy would not expect. Where Zephyrian ships fought individually to look impressive, human ships would fight as coordinated teams. Remember, Ryan said during one training session, they want us to be scared. When we don't run away, they won't know what to do. The simulations showed the difference clearly. When human ships used traditional tactics, they lost badly against the Zephyrian formations. But when they fought as coordinated teams, using their new weapons and strategies, they won consistently. Across human space, the preparation continued at an incredible pace. Shipyards that had been building exploration vessels were converted to produce warships. The new human military ships looked different from anything else in the galaxy. They were built for function, not appearance. Where Zephyrian ships were dark and intimidating, human ships were clean and efficient. Factory workers who had been making civilian goods started producing military equipment. Miners focused on extracting the materials needed for weapons and armor. Scientists worked on new technologies that could give humans an edge in the coming battle. But the most important preparation was happening in the minds of human soldiers and spacers. Unlike the rest of the galaxy, humans had never forgotten their violent past. They studied military history, learned from ancient battles, and understood that sometimes you had to fight to protect what you cared about. Commander Nick Foster ran training exercises for human fleet tactics. His job was to teach ship captains how to work together in ways that would confuse and overwhelm the enemy. The Zephyrians have been winning battles for 2,000 years, Nick told his students. But they've been winning against enemies who gave up. They don't know how to handle enemies who get stronger when they're attacked. What makes you so sure we'll get stronger? Asked one of the captains. Nick smiled. Because that's what humans do. When someone hits us, we hit back harder. When someone threatens us, we don't run away. We get angry, and angry humans are dangerous humans. The training exercises proved his point. Human crews that were losing in the first simulations got better with each attempt. They learned from their mistakes, adapted their tactics, and came back stronger. It was something the Zephyrians had never faced before. Dr. Julie Adams was studying the psychological profiles of both humans and Zephyrians. Her research revealed important differences between the species. The Zephyrians are predators, she explained to the military planners. But they're ambush predators. They rely on fear and surprise. When that doesn't work, they don't have a backup plan. And humans? Asked Admiral Morrison. Humans are persistence predators, sir. We don't give up. When our first attack fails, we try again. When the enemy adapts to our tactics, we adapt faster. It's what made us the dominant species on Earth. Intelligence. Reports from the occupied worlds confirmed this analysis. When alien species tried to resist the Zephyrians, they fought emotionally and gave up quickly when their attacks failed. The Zephyrians had learned to expect this pattern and had built their entire military strategy around it. As the deadline approached, human space became a hive of activity. Military exercises happened constantly. New weapons were tested and distributed. Ships were positioned at strategic points throughout human territory. But perhaps most importantly, humans were talking to each other. Families discussed what they would do if the enemy reached their worlds. Communities made plans for evacuation or resistance. Everyone understood that this was not just another conflict. This was a fight for survival. President Helen Ross gave speeches to boost morale, but she found that humans did not need much encouragement. They were angry about what had happened to the other species in the galaxy. They were determined to show the Zephyrians that not everyone would bow down to bullies. The enemy thinks we're alone, she said in one broadcast. They think we have no friends, no allies, no hope. They're wrong. We have each other. We have our courage. We have our refusal to give up. That's more than they have. As the Zephyrian fleet moved closer to human space, intercepted communications showed that the enemy was confident of victory. They had defeated every opponent they had faced. They saw no reason why humans would be different. They were about to learn that humans were very different indeed. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Titan, looking at the tactical displays that showed both fleets moving toward their confrontation. His ships were ready. His crews were trained. His weapons were loaded. In 2 days, the Zephyrian fleet would arrive at the edge of human space. The real test would begin then. 2,000 years of galactic peace were about to end in the most violent way possible. But Morrison was not worried. He had something the Zephyrians had never faced before. An enemy that got more dangerous when cornered, that fought harder when threatened, that never gave up no matter how bad things looked. He had humans, and humans were about to show the galaxy what that meant. The Zephyrian fleet arrived at the edge of human space like a black storm. 300 ships arranged in perfect formation, their dark hulls creating a void against the stars. They moved slowly, deliberately, giving their enemies time to see them coming and feel afraid. Admiral Korth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds. He was old even by Zephyrian standards. He had led fleets before humans had learned to make fire. In all his long life, he had never faced an enemy that did not surrender when they saw his ships. "Send the ultimatum," he ordered. The message went out on all human communication channels. Korth's voice was cold and filled with the authority of someone who had never been disobeyed. "Humans of Earth and the colonial worlds, you stand alone against the inevitable. Your former allies have accepted the wisdom of surrender. Join them in service to the Empire or join them in subjugation. You have 6 hours to respond." Korth expected the humans to reply quickly with their surrender. Every species did. Some took a few hours to debate, but they all came to the same conclusion in the end. Resistance was pointless against the might of the Zephyrian Empire. 6 hours passed. No surrender came. Korth was puzzled but not worried. Sometimes primitive species needed more time to understand their situation. He would give them 12 more hours to see reason. The human response came exactly 12 hours later. It was broadcast not just to the Zephyrian fleet, but to every surviving communication relay in the galaxy. Every world that still had working receivers would hear what humanity had to say. Admiral Jake Morrison appeared on the transmission from the bridge of his flagship, the Titan. He looked calm and relaxed, like someone discussing the weather rather than facing annihilation. "Admiral Korth, this is Admiral Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. We received your surrender demand and gave it all the consideration it deserves." Morrison paused and held up a piece of paper. Then, while looking directly at the camera, he crumpled it up and tossed it aside. "Our response is no. If you want our worlds, come and take them." The transmission ended. For a moment, Korth could not believe what he had just seen. No species had ever responded to a Zephyrian ultimatum with such casual dismissal. The human had treated the demand like it was garbage. "Admiral," said his second-in-command, Commander Vex, "perhaps they do not understand our power. Should we demonstrate?" Korth nodded slowly. "Yes. Destroy one of their outer colonies. Show them what happens to those who defy the Empire." The Zephyrian fleet moved toward the human colony of New Boston. It was a small world with only a few million people, perfect for making an example. But as they approached, something unexpected happened. Human ships came out to meet them. Captain Ryan Davis led the first squadron from his ship, the Defiant. Behind him came 20 other human cruisers, arranged in a formation the Zephyrians had never seen before. Instead of trying to look intimidating, the human ships moved with cold efficiency. "All ships, remember the plan," Ryan said over the communication channel. "They want to scare us. Let's see how they handle being scared themselves." The Zephyrian vanguard attacked first, using their traditional tactics. Their ships spread out in an impressive display, their dark hulls seeming to swallow the light around them. They expected the human ships to panic and scatter. Instead, the humans did something that shocked the Zephyrians. They charged straight at them. "Target their fear projectors," Ryan ordered. "Let's show them what they really look like." Human weapons fired with precise accuracy, but instead of aiming at the Zephyrian ships themselves, they targeted the devices that created the darkness effect. In seconds, the terrifying void ships were revealed as ordinary vessels with impressive but useless special effects. Commander Vex watched in horror as his vanguard was stripped of its intimidation factor. "They're not running," he reported to Admiral Korth. "They're attacking our fear projectors." "Impossible," Korth replied. "No species attacks our ships. They always run." "Not these humans, sir. They're treating this like a real battle." The human ships moved with coordination the Zephyrians had never encountered. Where Zephyrian vessels fought individually to show their power, human ships worked together like parts of a single organism. They covered each other, shared targeting, information, and adapted their tactics in real time. Captain Sandra Lewis commanded a group of smaller human ships that darted between the larger Zephyrian vessels like angry insects. Her ships were fast and hard to hit, and they targeted the enemy's weak points with surgical precision. "Focus on their engines," she told her pilots. "Can't be scary if you can't move." The Zephyrians tried to respond with their overwhelming firepower, but their weapons were designed for destroying helpless targets, not fighting against enemies who shot back. Their massive guns were slow to turn and easy to avoid. Worse, the humans seemed to actually enjoy the fighting. Zephyrian intercepted communications were filled with human laughter and jokes. These creatures were having fun in a life-or-death battle. "Direct hit on their command ship," reported Lieutenant Amy Brooks from the bridge of the Aurora. "Their formation is breaking up." Admiral Morrison watched the battle from his command center. The tactical display showed Zephyrian ships, scattered and confused, trying to regroup against an enemy that refused to behave like other species. "They don't know how to handle coordinated resistance," Morrison observed. "They're used to fighting scared animals, not organized soldiers." The battle that was supposed to demonstrate Zephyrian power became a demonstration of Zephyrian weakness. Ship after ship fell to human weapons. The survivors tried to retreat, but human ships pursued them relentlessly. Admiral Korth watched his vanguard being destroyed and felt something he had not experienced in centuries: fear. These humans fought like nothing in his experience. They treated combat as a science rather than a display of dominance. All ships, full retreat to Rally Point 7, he ordered, abandoning 2,000 years of Zephyrian military doctrine in a single moment. But the humans were not done. As the Zephyrian fleet tried to withdraw, human ships appeared from unexpected directions. They had been waiting in ambush, using tactics the Zephyrians could not predict. Colonel Matt Johnson coordinated the attack from Luna Base. His intelligence analysis had been perfect. The Zephyrians were so used to enemies who ran away that they had no defense against enemies who pursued them. Phase 2. Execute, Matt ordered. Human ships that had been hiding behind asteroids and small moons suddenly appeared, cutting off the Zephyrian retreat. The enemy fleet found itself surrounded by an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. The Zephyrians tried to fight their way out, but every move they made had been anticipated. The humans had studied their tactics for months and knew exactly how they would respond to each situation. Captain Nick Foster led a squadron of heavy cruisers that hammered the Zephyrian rearguard. His ships used new weapons that Dr. Kevin Wright had developed specifically for fighting Zephyrian armor. Their shields are designed to stop the weapons they know about, Nick explained to his gunners. These are weapons they've never seen before. The new human weapons cut through Zephyrian defenses like they were made of paper. Ship after ship exploded or surrendered, as their crews realized they were facing something beyond their understanding. Admiral Korth found himself trapped in the middle of the human formation. His mighty flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, was surrounded by human vessels that seemed impossibly small, but fought with the fury of cornered animals. "Admiral," Commander Vex said quietly, "we should consider surrender." The words hit Korth like a physical blow. Surrender? The Zephyrian Empire did not surrender. They were the ones who received surrenders from others. But as he watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by these strange humans, Korth realized that the old rules no longer applied. These creatures did not fight like any species he had ever encountered. They were not afraid. They did not give up. They seemed to get stronger as the battle went on. "Open a channel to the human fleet," Korth said, his voice barely a whisper. The transmission went out on all frequencies. For the first time in over 2,000 years, a Zephyrian admiral was about to do something that no Zephyrian had ever done before. Admiral Morrison appeared on the screen, looking calm despite the chaos of battle around him. "Admiral Korth, ready to discuss terms?" Korth's hands shook as he spoke the words that would change galactic history forever. The Zephyrian fleet surrenders. The battle stopped immediately. Human ships held their positions but ceased firing. Across the galaxy, every surviving communication relay carried the news that seemed impossible. The Zephyrian Empire, conqueror of worlds and terror of the galaxy for over 2 millennia, had just surrendered to a species that most aliens had barely noticed. But the humans were not done yet. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Throughout Zephyrian space, billions of enslaved beings waited for liberation. Admiral Morrison's response was broadcast to the entire galaxy. Surrender, accepted. Now let's talk about what happens next. 6 months after the surrender of the Zephyrian fleet, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the same council chamber where humanity had been kicked out of the galaxy. The room looked very different now. Many of the seats were empty. Some delegates attended by hologram because their worlds were still recovering from the occupation. Others had died in Zephyrian work camps. The survivors looked different too. The soft, comfortable aliens who had ruled the galaxy for 2,000 years were gone. In their place sat beings who had learned what it meant to suffer, to fight, and to survive. "The Zephyrian Empire no longer exists," Morrison announced to the quiet assembly. Their military surrendered unconditionally after the Battle of Proxima. Their civilian population has been relocated to supervised worlds where they cannot threaten anyone again. All occupied territories have been returned to their original inhabitants. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that showed a mixture of gratitude, shame, and uncertainty. The question now is what comes next. The old Confederation is gone. 2,000 years of peace bought by surrendering to every threat was not real peace. It was just delayed conquest. Elder Thane of the Valorian Assembly, one of the few species that had tried to resist during the occupation, spoke first. His. People had paid a heavy price for their courage, but they had survived. Humanity saved us all, he said. How can we ever repay such a debt? Admiral Amy Brooks, who had been promoted after her role in coordinating the liberation of occupied worlds, answered with typical human directness. You don't repay it. You learn from it. Peace is not something you maintain by avoiding conflict. It's something you protect by being willing to fight for it. The reformed Confederation looked very different from what had come before. The old Council of Elders was dissolved. In its place came a military alliance with humans at its center. Every member species was required to maintain real defense forces, not just ceremonial patrol ships. Dr. Kevin Wright had been studying the aftermath of the war. His report was required reading in every military academy across the galaxy. The Zephyrians were not uniquely evil, he wrote. They were simply the first predator species to test a galaxy that had forgotten how to defend itself. They will not be the last. His words proved prophetic. Within a year of the Zephyrian defeat, other threats emerged from the dark spaces between stars. Pirates who had been hiding for centuries suddenly felt brave enough to attack trade routes. Rogue nations that had been waiting for the right moment tried to expand their territories. But this time, the galaxy was ready. Captain Ryan Davis, now an admiral, led the joint fleet that responded to the first pirate incursion. The raiders expected to find the same frightened aliens they had preyed upon for generations. Instead, they found species that had been trained by humans in the art of war. Target their engines first, Ryan commanded the mixed fleet of human and alien ships. Then their weapons. No surrender accepted from pirates. The battle was over in minutes. The pirates, used to easy targets, had no answer for coordinated resistance. Word spread quickly through the criminal underworld that the galaxy was no longer a safe place for predators. President Helen Ross visited the memorial on Luna that honored the war's victims. The wall contained billions of names, not just human casualties, but all the beings who had died in Zephyrian work camps while their governments debated surrender terms. The inscription was simple. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Ross read the names quietly, thinking about how close civilization had come to total collapse. If humanity had not refused to surrender, if they had joined the rest of the galaxy in submission, the Zephyrians would have ruled forever. Never again, she whispered. The new Galactic Constitution included principles that would have been unthinkable under the old Confederation. Peace through strength, vigilance through unity, freedom through the willingness to fight for it. But the most important change was not written in any document. It was the change in how the galaxy thought about conflict and courage. General Patricia Hayes established training centers on dozens of worlds, teaching alien species how to fight effectively. The lessons were hard for beings who had known only peace, but they learned. Fighting is not about being aggressive, she told a class of Centauri officers. It's about being prepared. It's about knowing that if someone threatens what you care about, you can protect it. The Centauri had been among the first to surrender to the Zephyrians. Now they were among the most dedicated students of human military doctrine. Commander Nick Foster, now in charge of fleet tactics for the reformed Confederation, worked with alien crews to develop new strategies that combined the best of each species' abilities. Humans are good at coordination and persistence, he explained to a mixed crew. Valorians are excellent at individual combat. Rigelians have superior sensors. When we work together, we are stronger than any single species. The training paid off when the next major threat emerged. The hegemony of Krell, an ancient empire from outside the galaxy, arrived with a fleet twice the size of the Zephyrian force. They sent the same type of ultimatum that had worked so well in the past. Surrender or die. The galaxy's response was swift and unanimous. Come and try. The Battle of the Void lasted 3 days. The Krell had superior numbers and technology, but they faced an enemy that refused to break. Human ships led the charge, but they were supported by vessels from 50 different species, all working together with deadly efficiency. Admiral Morrison commanded the Allied fleet from the Titan. As he watched the Krell retreat after suffering massive losses, he thought about how much the galaxy had changed. "Sir," said his communication officer. "We're receiving surrender offers from 17 different Krell commanders." Morrison smiled. "Tell them to surrender to the species they were threatening. Let the Centauri handle the Krell Third Fleet. Let the Valorians deal with their assault force. It's time for them to learn that everyone can fight back now." Dr. Julie Adams published her study of the psychological changes in galactic civilization. "The greatest victory was not military," she wrote. "It was the moment when scared prey animals remembered they could be predators too. The galaxy had learned to laugh at bullies, but more importantly it had learned to fight them. Trade routes that had been abandoned during the Zephyrian crisis were reopened and better protected than ever. Colonies that had been evacuated were resettled with defensive systems that could hold off any attack. Captain Sandra Lewis, now running intelligence operations for the Reformed Confederation, monitored the dark spaces beyond the galaxy's edge. Her job was to watch for the next threat before it could surprise them. "There's always something out there," she reported to the Confederation leadership. "Pirates, rogue empires, ancient evils waking up. The difference is that now we're ready for them." As Admiral Morrison prepared to retire to his ranch on New Texas, he reflected on humanity's role in galactic affairs. They were no longer the ignored newcomers sitting quietly in council meetings. They had become the species others looked to when crisis threatened. But perhaps more importantly, they were no longer alone. The galaxy had learned the lessons that humans had never forgotten. Courage was contagious. Strength inspired strength. When one species stood up to bullies, others found the courage to stand up too. The memorial wall on Luna grew longer each year, but now it honored heroes who had died fighting rather than victims who had died helpless. The inscription remained the same, but its meaning had spread throughout the galaxy. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. The 2,000-year peace was indeed over. In its place came something more valuable, a galaxy willing to fight for its freedom, guided by the hard-learned lesson that predators only understand strength. Ships from dozens of species patrolled the trade routes together. Joint military exercises prepared allied forces for whatever might emerge from the darkness. And in the deepest reaches of space, exploration vessels from every civilization continued their missions, secure in the knowledge that someone, somewhere, was watching their backs. The galaxy had learned that peace was not the absence of conflict. It was the presence of justice, protected by those willing to fight for it. And when the next threat inevitably emerged from the void between stars, it would find not a galaxy of frightened sheep, but a galaxy of wolves who had remembered their teeth. The humans had taught them well. Jake Morrison walked into the huge council room on Nexus Prime. His hands were shaking a little, but he tried to keep his face calm. The room was bigger than a football stadium, with seats that went up to the ceiling. Thousands of alien beings sat in those seats, all looking down at the small human section. The air smelled strange, like metal and flowers mixed together. Jake had been coming to these meetings for 5 years now, but he still felt small in this place. The other aliens were so much older than humans. Some of their races had been traveling between stars for millions of years. Lisa Adams sat next to Jake. She was a captain in the Earth Space Navy, and she was here to help Jake understand the military parts of the discussions. She looked angry, which was not good. Lisa only looked angry when something very bad was about to happen. "The vote is starting," Lisa whispered to Jake. She pointed to the big screen floating in the middle of the room. Numbers were appearing on it, showing how each alien race was voting. Jake watched the numbers change. The Zephyrians voted yes. The Korthek Empire voted yes. The Villani Collective, who Jake thought were friends with humans, also voted yes. One by one, every alien race voted to put limits on human expansion into space. The motion was simple but terrible. Humans would not be allowed to build new colonies beyond their current 12 star systems. The aliens said humans were too dangerous and unpredictable. They said humans started too many wars and took too many risks. Jake thought this was unfair. Yes, humans had fought wars, but they had also helped other races many times. When the Korthak had a disease that was killing their children, human doctors had worked day and night to find a cure. When space pirates attacked Villani trade ships, human warships had chased them away. But none of that seemed to matter now. The vote finished. The screen showed the final numbers. Every alien race except humans had voted yes. The motion passed by a huge amount. Jake stood up slowly. The room became quiet. Thousands of alien eyes looked at him. Some of those eyes were like human eyes, but others were completely different. Some aliens had 4 eyes, some had eyes that glowed in the dark, and some had eyes that could see colors humans could not even imagine. "I have something to say," Jake announced. His voice was carried by speakers to every part of the huge room. A tall alien with blue skin and 6 arms was in charge of the meeting. His name was something Jake could not pronounce, so everyone just called him Chairman Blue. "You may speak, human representative," Chairman Blue said in a voice that sounded like rocks falling down a mountain. Jake took a deep breath. "For 300 years, humans have been part of this council. We have followed your rules. We have asked for permission. Before doing anything, we have tried to be good members of this galactic community." The room stayed quiet. Jake could hear his own heart beating. "But today, you have made it clear that you do not want us here as equals. You want us to stay in our corner of the galaxy and never grow. You want us to be pets, not partners." Some aliens started making angry noises. Chairman Blue hit his desk with one of his 6 hands, and the room became quiet again. "Therefore," Jake continued, "the United Earth Federation formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. We are leaving, effective immediately." Now the room exploded with noise. Aliens were shouting in hundreds of different languages. Some were standing up and waving their arms, tentacles, or whatever they had instead of arms. The translator machines were working so hard that they started smoking. Chairman Blue hit his desk again and again until the room became quiet. "You cannot simply leave," he said to Jake. "There are treaties, agreements, trade deals. You have responsibilities." Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "We had responsibilities to each other. You decided to end that relationship. All our treaties were based on us being equal members of this council. Since you have decided we are not equal, those treaties are no longer valid." Lisa Adams stood up next to Jake. She was a small woman, but she had the kind of presence that made everyone pay attention. "Human ships will begin leaving council space within the week," she announced. "All human colonies in council territory will be evacuated within 6 months. An alien that looked like a giant octopus with a shell raised several tentacles. You are making a terrible mistake, humans. The galaxy is dangerous outside council space. There are pirates, hostile aliens, and regions where no one has ever returned from." Jake nodded. "Maybe you are right. Maybe it is dangerous out there. But at least out there, we will be free to make our own choices and our own mistakes," Lisa added. "And maybe we will find that the galaxy is not as dangerous as you claim. Maybe you have been keeping us away from the good parts." The human delegation began walking toward the exit. Jake and Lisa led the way, followed by the other human representatives. They had come here with 12 people, representing all the major nations and colonies of Earth. Now all 12 were leaving together. As they walked, Jake heard Chairman Blue speaking to the other aliens. "Let them go," he said. "They are young and foolish. They will come back when they realize how much they need us." Other aliens were nodding and making sounds of agreement. Jake heard one say, "Good riddance. They were always causing trouble anyway." Jake and his team reached the exit. Before going through the door, Jake turned around one last time. The aliens were already starting to discuss other business, as if the humans had never been there at all. "They have no idea what they just did," Lisa whispered to Jake. Jake nodded. "No, they do not. But they will find out soon enough." They walked out of the council room and into the rest of their lives. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued its meeting, completely unaware that they had just made the biggest mistake in the history of the galaxy. The day humans left the Galactic Council had begun. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chambers. Now Admiral Kevin Burke stood on the bridge of the UES horizon, watching stars that no human had ever seen before. The ship was moving through space at the edge of the galaxy, far beyond where the council said it was safe to go. Kevin was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had been in the Earth Space Navy for 30 years, and he had never seen his people work so hard or so united. The withdrawal from the council had changed everything. "Admiral, we have another one," called out Lieutenant Amy Watson from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with bright red hair and an excited smile. "Another habitable planet, sir. That makes 17 this month." Kevin walked over to look at her screen. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents. It looked a lot like Earth, but bigger. "Any signs of intelligent life?" he asked. "None that we can detect, sir. It looks completely empty, but perfect for human colonization." Kevin nodded. This was exactly what they had hoped to find. The council had told humans that all the good planets were already taken, that there was no room for human expansion. But out here, beyond council space, they were finding worlds that were better than anything humans had ever dreamed of. Dr. Amanda Foster came onto the bridge carrying a tablet full of data. She was the ship's expert on alien life, and she had been studying everything they found in this new region of space. Amanda was a small woman with dark skin and smart eyes that missed nothing. "Admiral, you need to see this," Amanda said, showing him her tablet. "We have made contact with 3 new alien species in the past month. All of them are friendly, and all of them want to trade with us." Kevin looked at the information on the ear tablet. The 3 species were called the Runners, the Builders, and the Singers. The Runners were fast and loved to explore new places. The Builders made amazing technology that could build entire cities in just a few days. The Singers had discovered how to use sound waves to heal injuries and diseases. "What do they want from us?" Kevin asked. Amanda smiled. "They want to learn about human creativity and problem solving. They say humans think in ways they have never seen before. The Runners want to learn our exploration techniques. The Builders want to study our engineering methods. The Singers want to understand human music and art." This was incredible news. In 6 months of independence, humans had found more friendly aliens than they had met in 300 years of council membership. Kevin wondered if the council had been keeping humans away from these species on purpose. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter was addressing a crowd of 10,000 people in Washington, D.C. The whole world was watching on television and the internet. Helen was a strong woman in her 50s with silver hair and a voice that could inspire anyone. "My fellow humans," Helen began. "6 months ago, the Galactic Council tried to put us in a cage. They thought they could limit our growth and keep us small. But they made a mistake. They set us free." The crowd cheered loudly. Flags from every nation on Earth were waving in the audience. For the first time in centuries, all of humanity was working together toward the same goal. "Our colonies are packing up and leaving council space," Helen continued, "but they are not coming home. They are going beyond to places where we can build the future we choose. In the past 6 months, we have launched more colony ships than in the past 50 years. This was true. Every factory on Earth and Mars was working day and night. They were building ships, supplies, and equipment for the greatest migration in human history. People from every country were volunteering to help. Old enemies were working side by side, united by their shared human identity. The council thought, "We needed them," Helen said. "But we are discovering that they needed us more than we needed them." Back in council space, the first signs of trouble were starting to appear. On the trade station Deepport 9, Captain Roy Stevens was trying to fix a broken shipping route. Roy was a human who had decided to stay in council space to wind down human business operations. "The shipping schedule is falling apart," Roy told the station manager, an alien that looked like a walking tree with eyes. "Humans ran most of the fast courier services between council worlds. Without us, packages are taking 3 times longer to deliver." The tree alien made a sound like wind through leaves, which meant he was worried. "Can the other council races take over these services?" Roy shook his head. "They are trying, but they do not understand human logistics methods. We created systems that were faster and more efficient than anything the council had before. Now, those systems are breaking down. Similar problems were happening all over Council space. Human-designed computer networks were starting to fail because no one knew how to maintain them. Trade routes that humans had protected from pirates were becoming dangerous again. Scientific research projects that depended on human creativity were slowing down or stopping completely. On the military station Guardian 7, General Bill Murphy was preparing to leave with the last human soldiers in Council space. Bill was a tough old soldier who had fought pirates and rebels for 20 years. "Sir, the Council Defense Network is asking us to stay," reported Colonel Nancy Price. "They say our departure will leave gaps in their security that they cannot fill." Bill laughed, but there was no humor in it. 6 months ago they said we were too dangerous to be trusted with expansion rights. Now they want us to stay and protect them. The answer is no. The truth was that humans had been doing much more work in the Council than anyone had realized. They had been the troubleshooters, the innovators, the ones who solved problems that no one else could solve. Without humans, the Council was discovering that many things they had taken for granted were starting to break down. But the humans were not looking back. They were too busy building their new future among the stars. 2 years had passed since humans left the Galactic Council, and everything was going wrong for the alien races. Admiral Vextar of the Korthak Empire stood in the war room on the capital world, staring at battle reports that made no sense. 30. Void Stalkers had returned. Vextar was a massive alien, 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like black metal. His people were known as the greatest warriors in the galaxy, but even they were losing every battle against these ancient enemies. The reports on his desk told the same story over and over: complete defeat. "How many ships did we lose at Gamma?" 7? Vextar asked his aide, a younger Korthak named Zekthor. "All of them, sir. 43 warships gone in less than an hour." Vextar crushed the metal report tablet in one of his hands. The Void Stalkers were energy beings that had terrorized the galaxy 1,000 years ago. Back then they had destroyed entire civilizations before mysteriously disappearing. Now they were back, and they were worse than before. The problem was that normal weapons did not work against them. Laser cannons passed right through their energy bodies. Missiles exploded, without doing any damage. Even the most powerful shields could not stop their attacks. The Void Stalkers could drain power from any technology they touched, leaving ships dead in space. "Sir, we have a communication from the Emergency Council meeting," Zekthor reported. On the main screen, representatives from all the major council races appeared. They all looked scared and desperate. Chairman Blue was there, along with leaders from the Volani Collective, the Zephyrian Alliance, and dozens of other species. "The situation is getting worse," Chairman Blue announced. "The Void Stalkers have taken 12 star systems in the past month. Our conventional forces cannot stop them." Counselor Yithara of the Volani Collective spoke next. She was a tall, thin alien with purple skin and large black eyes. "We must consider all options. Perhaps it is time to contact the humans." The room became very quiet. For 2 years, none of the council races had wanted to admit they missed the humans. Pride had kept them from reaching out to their former members. "The humans were troublemakers," said Admiral Kexlin of the Zephyrians. "They always wanted to try dangerous and untested strategies. We do not need their reckless methods." But Counselor Yithara did not give up. "Those reckless methods might be exactly what we need. The humans always found solutions when everyone else said there was no hope." Meanwhile, far away from council space, humans were building something amazing. Commander Ryan Torres stood on the observation deck of New Colorado Station, watching ships from 6 different species dock at the same time. In just 2 years, humans had created a new alliance that was bigger and stronger than anything the Council had ever built. Ryan was a middle-aged man with brown hair and kind eyes. He had been in charge of establishing human colonies in this region, and he could hardly believe how well everything was going. The station around him was a mixture of human engineering and alien technology, creating something that was better than either could build alone. Captain Frank Miller walked up to Ryan carrying good news. Frank was the head of trade operations, and he always had a smile on his face. "Ryan, you need to see the latest numbers. Trade volume is up 300% from last month." Ryan looked at the data. Ships from the runners, builders, and singers were arriving every day, along with vessels from 3 more species they had met recently. The growers, who could make plants grow on any world. The fixers, who could repair any broken technology. And the seekers, who knew the location of resources throughout this part of the galaxy. The council races are missing out on all of this, Frank said. While they are stuck in their old ways, we are building the future. But the good news was interrupted by an emergency message from Earth. President Helen Carter appeared on the communication screen, and she looked worried. Commander Torres, we have received disturbing reports from our intelligence sources in council space. An ancient enemy called the Void Stalkers has returned, and the council races are losing badly. Ryan had heard stories about the Void Stalkers from historical records. They were one of the greatest threats the galaxy had ever faced. What do we know about them, Madam President? Not much. They are energy beings that can drain power from any technology. They destroyed many civilizations 1,000 years ago before disappearing. Our sources say the Council's conventional weapons are useless against them. Frank looked concerned. Are they heading in our direction? Not yet, but if they finish destroying Council space, we might be next. I am calling an emergency meeting of all human colony leaders. We need to decide what to do. The meeting took place 3 days later, with representatives from all human colonies participating by video link. Jake Morrison, now retired from diplomatic service, was brought in as an advisor. His hair was whiter than before, but his mind was still sharp. The council races treated us badly, Jake said to the group. They tried to limit our growth and keep us weak. Part of me thinks we should let them face this threat alone. But Admiral Kevin Burke, now in charge of all human space forces, disagreed. That is not who we are, Jake. We do not abandon people in need, even if they abandoned us first. Captain Lisa Adams, now a general, supported Burke. Besides, if the Void Stalkers destroy the council races, they will eventually come for us. It is better to fight them now, while we have potential allies, than to face them alone later. The debate continued for hours. Some humans wanted revenge against the council races. Others felt they should help because it was the right thing to do. Finally, President Carter made the decision. We will offer our assistance, but only on our terms. We are not rejoining the council, and we are not putting ourselves under their command. If they want our help, they have to accept us as equal partners. The message was sent to council space immediately. For the first time in 2 years, humans were contacting their former colleagues. But this time, the humans were not asking for permission or begging for acceptance. They were offering help from a position of strength. The question was whether the proud council races would swallow their pride and accept help from the species they had tried to cage. The Void Stalkers were winning. Every day brought news of another star system falling to the energy beings. The council races were retreating toward their core worlds, abandoning colonies and outposts as they ran out of options. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of her exploration ship far from the fighting, studying ancient ruins on a dead world called Kepler 438. Maria was a small woman with black hair and sharp eyes who loved solving mysteries. What she had found here might be the key to saving the galaxy. Dr. Williams, are you seeing this? Maria called to her chief archaeologist. Peter Williams was an older man with a gray beard who had spent his life studying ancient civilizations. He was excited about their discovery, but also worried about what it meant. The markings are clear, Captain, Peter said, pointing to symbols carved into a massive stone wall. This world was attacked by the Void Stalkers exactly 1,000 years ago. But look at this section here. Peter showed Maria a part of the wall that told a different story. The symbols showed the Void Stalkers retreating, being driven away by ships that looked very different from anything the current council races used. These ships were not built by any species we know today, Peter explained. The designs are completely different, more aggressive, more adaptable. The species that drove off the Void Stalkers 1,000 years ago are all extinct now. Maria studied the ancient pictures. The ships and the carvings had some things in common with human designs. They were smaller than council ships, but seemed to be faster and more flexible. What happened to these species? That is the interesting part, Peter said. According to these records, they were not destroyed by the Void Stalkers. They disappeared after the victory. Some of the symbols suggest they left this part of the galaxy voluntarily, maybe to explore beyond the rim. Maria realized what this meant. So the species that could fight the Void Stalkers are gone, and the species that are left never learned how to fight them. Exactly. The current council races survived because others did the fighting for them. They never had to develop the tactics and technologies needed to battle energy beings. Maria sent an urgent message to Earth. This information needed to reach Admiral Burke and the other human leaders immediately. While she waited for a response, she continued studying the ruins with Peter. They found more evidence of how the ancient species had fought the Void Stalkers. The key seemed to be using the energy being's own power against them. Instead of trying to block their energy-draining attacks, the ancient warriors had found ways to redirect that energy back at the attackers. It is like martial arts, Peter explained. Instead of meeting force with force, they used the enemy's strength against them. Back on Earth, Admiral Burke was meeting with a secret group of young officers from various council species. These aliens had been studying human military tactics for months, trying to learn new ways to fight the Void Stalkers. The leader of this group was Lieutenant Zarketh, a young Korthak who had always admired human creativity. Unlike his elders, Zarketh believed that the old ways of fighting were not enough. He had convinced officers from 12 different species to join his underground resistance movement. Admiral Burke, we need your help, Zarketh said in his deep, rocky voice. We have tried to use human tactics, but we do not understand them well enough. Every time we face the Void Stalkers, we lose more ships. Burke looked at the young aliens sitting around the table. They were brave to come here in secret, knowing that their own governments would consider them traitors for working with humans. What exactly do you want from us? A Vellani officer named Silthera spoke up. We want to learn how humans think about warfare. Your people see battles differently than we do. You take risks that we would never consider, and somehow you make them work. Burke understood their problem. The council races had spent thousands of years fighting wars in the same way. They built big, heavily armored ships and tried to overpower their enemies with superior numbers and firepower. But the Void Stalkers were not affected by conventional weapons, so traditional tactics were useless. Human warfare is based on adaptation, Burke explained. We change our tactics based on what the enemy does. If something does not work, we try something else immediately. We are not afraid to retreat, regroup, and attack from a different angle. The young alien officers listened carefully. This was exactly what they needed to learn, but it was very different from how their people normally fought. Meanwhile, Captain Maria Santos received new orders from Earth. She was to continue studying the ancient ruins and send all information back to human military researchers. Other exploration ships were being sent to look for more evidence of how the Void Stalkers had been defeated before. On the human colony world of New Texas, scientists were working day and night to understand the ancient tactics. Dr. Jennifer Walsh led a team of engineers who were trying to build weapons based on the old designs they had found. The principle seems simple, Jennifer explained to her team. Instead of trying to destroy the Void Stalkers directly, we create feedback loops that use their own energy against them. But the engineering is incredibly complex. Jennifer was a brilliant woman who had designed some of humanity's most advanced weapons. If anyone could figure out how to build anti-Void Stalker technology, it was her. Back in Council space, the situation was getting desperate. The Void Stalkers had taken half of the Korthak Empire and were moving toward the core worlds. Millions of aliens were fleeing their homes, creating refugee crises on dozens of planets. Chairman Blue finally made the decision that everyone knew was coming. In a broadcast that reached every world in Council space, he spoke the words that none of the Council races had wanted to say. Citizens of the galaxy, our situation is grave. The ancient enemy has returned, and our traditional defenses have failed. Therefore, the Galactic Council formally requests assistance from the United Earth Federation and all human colonies. The message was sent to Earth, New Colorado, New Texas, and every other human settlement. After 2 years of silence, the Council was finally reaching out to the species they had tried to cage. But would the humans answer the call for help? And even if they did, would it be too late to save the galaxy from the Void Stalkers? The message from the Galactic Council reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. President Helen Carter read it 3 times before calling an emergency meeting of the Human Federation Cabinet. The proud alien races were finally asking for help, but it might be too late. They waited too long, said General Lisa Adams, now the head of Human Military Command. The Void Stalkers have taken over half of Council space. Billions of aliens are dead or missing. Admiral Kevin Burke stood at the window, looking out at the busy spaceport where ships were being loaded with supplies. The question is not whether we can save them. The question is whether we should. Jake Morrison, now serving as senior advisor to the president, spoke quietly. If we let the council races die, we become like them. We become the kind of people who abandon others out of pride and anger. President Carter nodded. Jake is right. This is not about them. This is about who we choose to be. She looked around the room at her advisors. We are going to help them, but we do it our way. 3 days later, the largest human fleet in history jumped into council space. Admiral Burke commanded from the flagship UES Liberty, a massive ship that had been built using both human engineering and technology, learned from their new alien allies. The human fleet was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. The ships moved like living creatures, changing direction instantly and working together like a school of fish. Their hulls were covered with adaptive armor that could change its properties based on what kind of attack it faced. Captain Scott Johnson commanded the destroyer UES Falcon, one of the smaller ships in the fleet. Scott was a young officer who had trained specifically to fight energy beings. His ship carried the new feedback weapons that Dr. Jennifer Walsh had designed based on ancient technology. Contact ahead, reported Lieutenant Danny Cooper from the sensor station. Void Stalkers, dozens of them, attacking the Korthak defense station at Rigel 7. Through the main screen, Scott could see the battle. The Korthak had built a huge fortress around their military headquarters, but it was losing. The Void Stalkers flowed around the station like deadly smoke, draining power from its shields and weapons. All ships, this is Admiral Burke, came the voice over the communication system. Remember your training. Do not try to fight them like normal enemies. Use their own power against them. The human fleet spread out and approached the Void Stalkers from multiple directions. This was the first real test of their new tactics and weapons. Commander Rachel Stone commanded the cruiser UES Defiance. She had spent months training for this moment. Target the lead Void Stalker, she ordered her crew. Fire feedback pulse. The weapon looked like a normal energy beam, but it was completely different. Instead of trying to destroy the Void Stalker, it created a loop that fed the creature's own energy back into itself. The result was immediate and spectacular. The Void Stalker began to glow brighter and brighter as its own drained energy returned to it multiplied. Within seconds, it exploded in a burst of light that lit up the entire star system. It works, shouted Lieutenant Cooper from the Falcon. The feedback weapons actually work. Across the battlefield, human ships were engaging Void Stalkers and winning. The energy beings that had seemed invincible were being destroyed by their own power turned against them by human ingenuity and ancient wisdom. But the Void Stalkers were not stupid. They began to adapt, changing their attack patterns to avoid the feedback loops. This was exactly what Admiral Burke had expected. All ships switch to pattern Delta, Burke ordered. They are learning, so we learn faster. The human fleet immediately changed tactics. Some ships began using gravitational fields to trap Void Stalkers in place while others hit them with feedback pulses. Other ships created false energy signatures to confuse the creatures about where the real targets were. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, every Void Stalker in the system had been destroyed or driven away. The Korthak defense station was saved, and thousands of alien lives had been preserved. Admiral Vextar, the Korthak commander, sent a message to the human fleet. His voice was humble, very different from the proud tone he had used years before. Human ships, the Korthak Empire thanks you. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid. But Admiral Burke was not interested in gratitude. Admiral Vextar, we need to work together if we are going to win this war. Your people know this region of space better than we do. Our people know how to fight energy beings. Together, we might be able to save everyone. Over the following weeks, Human and Council forces worked together to push back the Voidstalkers. It was not easy. The ancient enemies were spread across dozens of star systems, and they continued to adapt to human tactics. But humans adapted faster. Captain Maria Santos used her archaeological knowledge to find more ancient battlefields, learning new techniques from each discovery. Dr. Jennifer Walsh improved the feedback weapons every few days, making them more effective against the evolving enemy. Young officers like Lieutenant Zarketh served as bridges between human and council forces, translating not just languages but ways of thinking. The underground resistance he had formed became the core of a new combined military structure. The final battle took place at the edge of council space, near the place where the Voidstalkers had first emerged. Thousands of ships from dozens of species fought together under human tactical command. Jake Morrison, now 75 years old, watched the battle from Earth. The man who had walked out of the council chambers 3 years before could hardly believe how much had changed. President Carter stood beside him as the news came in. "The Voidstalkers are retreating beyond the Galactic Rim," reported the communication officer. "All council worlds are secure." The war was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. The old Galactic Council was dissolved, replaced by a new federation where humans and aliens worked as equals. Trade flowed freely between all species, and exploration reached levels never before imagined. The day humans left the Galactic Council had indeed been the day the universe changed forever. What the aliens had meant as punishment had become the greatest gift they could have given to the galaxy. By setting humans free, they had freed everyone.